All right, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. Telephone number 870-275-9799. That's the telephone number if you want to text the program. Folks, I want to introduce you on the program for the first time. We've got Everett Bartlett. Everett Bartlett is the president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Everett, welcome to the show.
Hello, Paul. Great to chat with you.
Yes, sir. I'm glad that you're available to spend some time with us this morning. I want to get to a few headlines, but before I do, can you just kind of tell us the Coalition to End Domestic Violence? How did you get involved with something like this?
Well, the Coalition to End Domestic Violence is a group of about 40 well-known organizations like the Tea Party Patriots and the Faith and Family Coalition and many others that are concerned, very concerned, that the Violence Against Women Act has gone way off the scale. It is not about stopping domestic violence. It's all about promoting a gender agenda and growing government and undermining the family. So, and that's what we're about in a couple sentences.
You know, that's interesting. We just had Rachel Malone from Gun Owners of America talking about the End Domestic Violence or Violence Against Women Act. She was, concerned about what they were actually doing by, putting legislation or language in there that's going to disarm women. So she's just saying it's actually pro-violence in that regard. But if you don't mind, can you expand on that? What about the gender? What about the gender and the LGBT RSTLNE? Would you like to buy a VAW community? What are they trying to put in the Violence Against Women Act?
Well, certainly. So this is the first of all. Let's all be aware that this was the product of former Senator Joe Biden. He was the person who carried this banner forward, and we're going all the way back to the 1990s. The Violence Against Women Act was first passed in 1994, and so let's think of this first of all in terms of what's happened to due process in our country. So, under the Violence Against Women Act, there was a section called mandatory arrest. Okay, which means that that as a result of that provision, the concept of probable cause was removed, and so that any person, usually a man, could be arrested simply on the basis of a woman's word, saying that I'm fearful, I'm afraid. No actual hard evidence, no corroboration, but that's where we can trace this all the way back to 1994. Let's now move to 2011, and that was, of course, the Obama era. And in that year, 2011, the Obama administration released a mandate that created what we now call campus kangaroo courts. These are the tribal tribunals at every college and university in Arkansas and across the country that decide on allegations of usually sexual assault. They're called campus kangaroo courts because there's no due process and there's no presumption of innocence. Let's now fast forward to 2017. That's when the Me Too movement was born. And so the Me Too movement actually transformed this fairly small issue of, Violence Against Women Act and campus kangaroo courts, transformed it into a national movement. Okay, so it galvanized the attention and the anger of millions of Americans, mostly women. And so the first major scalp of the Me Too movement was Senator Al Franken. And we can talk about that later if you'd like to. The following year was Brett Kavanaugh, and the hearings that, all the people there were wearing T-shirts that said, "Believe survivors." Well, if that's not a complete negation of the concept of presumption of innocence, I don't know what is. So here we are, 2019, we're talking about the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and Senators Boozman and Cotton are key people in that debate.
Wow. So there. Are they changing anything from the past that's kind of enabled this, the status quo? I mean, is there newer language that's being submitted in the 2019 reauthorization?
So yes, and on steroids. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. So Mr. Biden himself has admitted that every time they do a reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which is every 5 years, they make it bigger and stronger. Okay, those are his words. What they mean by that is they send out, yet another tentacle into society. You just mentioned earlier about Second Amendment rights. That's a perfect example of yet another tentacle that's being sent out by as a result of VAWA that's increasingly fundamentally reshaping our society. So what's happening right now is that in the House of Representatives, which of course is controlled by Democrats, in April, just a few months ago, they passed its version of the VAW Reauthorization. And I hope you and I hope your listeners have your seatbelts on, because this bill has fundamentally expanded the definition of domestic violence to include verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, and technological abuse, which means that, if you have ever been subjected to the silence treatment by your spouse,
not me.
Isn't that a form of emotional abuse?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, I think you could say the answer is yes, but not. That shouldn't be that's not a crime. That's not like the government doesn't need to get involved.
Exactly, and that's the exact
I don't know about
point.
Emotional abuse. I wouldn't say the word. I don't think it's abusive. Could it be? Yeah, but I mean, the government doesn't need to get involved. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, we're not diminishing the silence treatment certainly has an impact. Calling people a nasty name has an impact, but that's not where the government needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's the exact language. I have not exaggerated in the slightest bit in describing this House bill.
Wow.
That passed on April the 4th.
Well, it's going to be bad. I mean, the Democrats have control of the House, so they're basically trying to do everything they can. What I would just say is they're social. I mean, the Democrats are social engineers, and they're going to try to change codes to try to get people in trouble, so they'll alter behavior. So verbal abuse. I mean, you mentioned verbal abuse. I mean, who's going to decide what verbal abuse is?
Well, that's exactly the point. That the term is not even defined in the language of the bill, which means that basically we'll just make it up as we go along.
It's really scary. Folks, we're talking with Everett Bartlett. He's the president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. You mentioned Al Franken. Last week, the New Yorker had a piece, and Al Franken is essentially saying he regrets resigning. Of course, there were photos of him sexually harassing a model. She was asleep, and he had photos of photos he had taken of his hands on her chest while she was asleep. And then I think she had some allegations about the way he treated her overseas and that sort of thing, or maybe a forced kiss. I can't remember exactly, but the bottom line is the Me Too movement said, you got to go, Al Franken. And so he resigned his Senate seat for Minnesota. And now he's like, well, and members, allies in the leftist media are saying maybe Al Franken shouldn't have been forced to step down.
Correct. Yeah. So there's no doubt that Mr. Franken engaged in boorish behavior. All right. But we just accept that as a fact. Did this boorish behavior rise to the level of sexual assault? Well, if you look at that photograph you're just mentioning, I don't think she was actually touching the woman's breast.
Okay.
He was kind of pretending. So does pretending to touch a woman's breast, does that rise to the level of sexual assault? I don't think so, but that really is not the point. The point is he deserved due process. He deserved the presumption of innocence. he deserved the opportunity to face his accuser. He deserved an objective and fair inquiry, and he got none of those. And that's exactly the point. We have gone so far in our notion of due process that even a person who was, thinking bad thoughts or is kind of acting out, isn't that what the presumption of innocence is all about?
I completely agree with you. I really do. As much as I, couldn't stand Al Franken's politics. The funny thing to me, in order to say funny, is, the left. I've been talking about how the left, especially the news media, they're kind of like news priests, and they can absolve you of the very thing they condemn someone for, the next day or the day before. It just this virtue signaling, this ever changing wheel of morality to accomplish their political goals. And I think, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Everett, but I think the reason why Al Franken had to go was because of the Democrats wanting to win an Alabama Senate seat where Roy Moore had all these allegations against him, of sexual misconduct or, dating young women or young girls. And I think because it happened at the same time, the Democrats were like, we've got to win this, temporarily win this seat for Democrats to send a message to the country that they're rejecting Donald Trump, and it was worth them getting rid of Al Franken. That's what I think happened, and I think Al Franken's like, that wasn't worth it because this Senate seat's probably going to go to Tommy Tuberville or whoever, whatever Republican gets it,
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But again, that points to this broader, shift in our society. We've eliminated due process and made it the handmaiden of political calculations and political intrigue. And isn't there something wrong with that? But let's talk about Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, we all saw with our own eyes the specter of mob hysteria right there in the buildings of the Senate, on the doors of the Supreme Court. I mean, this is where our society has been moving since 1994, and it's time that we dial this back. And so we actually do have an opportunity. Let's talk about the Violence Against Women Act again, because this crazy bill that came out of the House of Representatives in April that turns the silence treatment into a crime, of course, the Senate is controlled by Republicans. And Republicans, I think it's fair to say they're on to the game. They're on to this broader agenda at work. They see what the gender warriors are doing. And so they have rejected this House bill, and they are working on a new version of the Violence Against Women Act that accords with due process, that accords with the presumption of innocence, and get this, the latest survey from the Centers for Disease Control shows that now men are more likely to be victims of domestic violence than women.
Wow.
That's the kind of, factual basis that we need to, make part of our thinking when we talk about domestic violence.
So when you say domestic violence, like a man, is that just like basically a woman beating up a man or hitting the man and the man doesn't do anything? Or, I mean, can you speak to that real quick? I mean, are there more women out there that just kind of think that they have a right to hit a man if they want?
Yeah. So domestic violence is, it involves a physical abuse. It could be a slap, pushing, a shove, threat to use a knife, threat to use a gun, a fist, in the face. All of those are different forms, examples of domestic violence. And we've always known that women are pretty close to men in terms of the level of domestic violence. But now, this latest CDC report shows that actually women are 31% more likely to be the perpetrators than men. And that's never happened before.
That is strange. I'd wonder why. I wonder why that is, because you're right. I mean,
well, I think there's two reasons for that, Paul. One is that because of the name of this law, it only has paid attention to male-perpetrated abuse. So female perpetrated abuse has been sort of a, we'll give that a free pass kind of thing. But I think there's a deeper reason, and this is part of the ideology behind the Violence Against Women Act. That ideology says that people engage in domestic violence in order to uphold patriarchal power and privilege. Of course, that's totally absurd, but that is the ideology. And so I'm aware of examples of women who condone other women being violent, physically violent, because they think, oh, you're toppling the patriarchy because you just punched your husband in the stomach.
That's it's certainly interesting times that we live in, and certainly things are changing, and that's a potential explanation for it. I don't know. It definitely is. I'm glad that you bring this up, though. We're talking with Everett Bartlett. We appreciate you coming on the show, president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Everett, we're going to make a YouTube video of this, for the listeners, just a separate video. And we're going to share this out there. I really appreciate what you have to say about the End Domestic Violence Act, or against women. What's the name of it again?
Violence Against Women Act.
Violence Against Women Act, and the language that they're putting in there that are essentially, doing the Democrats' bidding and trying to social engineer and change behavior, change the law. Expanding government where they have no business of being. And we need to stop this thing, and hopefully the Senate will amend this new language out, and at the very least send it back to the House that way.
Correct. So Senators Boozman and Cotton, they need to hear from your listeners that there is broad awareness of how this bill has clearly gone off the rails, is just ignoring due process, and we're seeing the broader effects.
Well, I appreciate it, Everett Bartlett. It's always great to have you on, sir.
Good to talk with you, Paul.
All righty. We'll do it again soon. 870-275-9799. Call or text, and we'll be back here in just a moment.